and I cut my own hair.
Yeah, no, I never got so complicated. I was like
Just one
blank
size
and
fits all, just all the way around.
and it was quick and easy. And with the heat here, I was like, all right, that works for now.
I've considered
So
it. I've considered it, but at the same time, just like I don't know. It looked kind of weird.
it
It's not. I don't know.
at one point I had hair down to, you know, past my shoulders. Then I had no hair. Well, let's say minimal hair, cut really short.
Uh-huh.
Then it's hair. It grows back
It grows back. It grows back.
until it doesn't.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're good. Okay,
Yeah.
we're on.
Alright.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey,
This is the Land of Enlightenment podcast.
cool.
Yeah, that's
Happy
the
for
name.
the invite. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for being on. So what I typically do with guests is I allow them to introduce themselves a little bit. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm allowed to speak on who I am and what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you gave my name, so that's all
Mhm.
good.
Yeah.
I'm professor at UNM.
Okay.
Associate professor, Spanish, Portuguese, and Latin American studies. So
Okay.
research interests, kind of contemporary Latin American cinema. Do a lot of stuff with Brazilian cinema.
Mhm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
things.
So you do a
are
lot
there.
of. How's it going? We got a guest.
Sorry.
We have. So you do Latin American cinema, which is most of the classes we've done. That
Yeah,
I've
the
done.
majority that you've done are Latin American cinema, more specifically, even a lot of times Brazilian cinema, right? Or Brazilian
Yeah.
studies.
I think. So the reason those who are watching and listening, I was a student of yours for a long time, so the classes I took with you were, a couple of them were just mostly I don't think mostly just cultural ones. I never did. You did one on like soccer. I always heard about this one.
No, you didn't do that one.
I didn't do that one.
The first class I believe that you took with me was actually a intermediate Portuguese class.
It was. I'd just gotten laid off, and I'd come back from. I decided to do another major in Portuguese, and
Yeah.
it was that semester when I talked to you about the master's program.
There you go.
What class was that? Which one was that one?
Spanish 311 or Portuguese 311.
Portuguese 311, and we did a bunch of different stuff with like just cultural productions, music, stuff like that. And then I took a liking to you because you really knew a lot of really cool music and a lot of cool film, and I was like, this guy's kind of neat, man.
I thought it was because you had done media studies previously, and you're like, okay, I got to produce a short in this film, so
I
can hang for a bit.
I did. Well, I did. That was the final project for that class,
Yep, it
right?
was
So
the
I did
final
a short
project.
film, but I had done that, and but we had similar interests. Now you did film, or you studied film specifically, right?
Yeah, my dissertation is all on film.
In film, you did, but you
So-
never did you didn't never got like a degree in media production.
No, not in media production. It
Okay.
was all from more of an academic study side on Latin
It's-
American culture and
Okay.
film.
Okay.
So-
And what did you get your degrees in? You said Gonzaga?
That's undergraduate.
Oh, what did you get that in?
Spanish.
In Spanish?
Undergraduate Spanish. Got a master's at Vanderbilt in Spanish.
Okay.
And then did my PhD here in Latin American studies.
Latin American
actually.
studies.
Yep.
So you studied Spanish. Where did the Portuguese come in?
Well, I started messing around some with Portuguese at Vanderbilt when I
Yeah.
was a graduate student, and then Layla, my wife, and I met
Mhm.
and kind of just went from there.
And she's Brazilian.
She's Brazilian, so spent
Yeah.
time in Brazil,
Okay.
different summers here and there. We're traveling more to Brazil, so
And just started picking it up.
picking it up, kind of making, landing in Sao Paulo, meeting different people,
Yeah.
and just really enjoyed it. So
And you just kind of fell in love with with your wife for one, and then
yeah,
Brazil.
and there you go.
In Brazil, yeah.
Mhm.
They always say pillow talk is the best way to learn a language, and I say I agree. I agree. Just just sitting there, just lying down and just talking, and and it just sinks in, and you're just like, yeah, speaking that language.
You need something. You need something that pulls you in. I mean, I learned Spanish because I
Yeah.
moved to Spain, and and just kind of like fell into it, and I was like, wow, okay.
You moved there, or you studied abroad there?
That I moved there for a year.
Hmm.
I was moved. I was finishing high school
Yeah.
Not sure if I wanted to continue to college at that point in my life. Landed, because I graduated young, landed on an opportunity with American Field Services to study abroad.
Uh huh.
And they sent me back to school because I graduated and I was 17.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, you can go to high school there. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. Why not?
Just decided to
So
go.
it was an opportunity, and I think it was one of the first times I had ever flown and gotten out. Like, it was the first time I had really gotten out of the country or anything like that. So I was like, and they're paying for my trip to go, and they have a family and everything. I was like, this is like ideal. Sure, I'll try it. Because if not, I'll never get to travel.
What you were where were you graduating from high school?
I graduated from high school in Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho.
But I'd only lived there for 9 months at that point.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
literally, I moved there when the school year started, my senior year, and left.
Okay.
When
And
the
you
school year
you
ended.
moved around a lot, right? Because
No.
you said you lived in Philly. I thought you were from Philly. You are.
I'm not. I'm from outside of Philly, about 45 minutes outside of Philly.
Okay.
Originally.
That's what I thought.
A
Okay.
small town called Lancaster. So,
I think I've heard that.
yeah. So.
Yeah.
And we moved all around in kind of that general vicinity,
Uh huh.
but I had never moved out of state or anything. And then my mother
Yeah.
moved us out there, and from there,
Idaho, man.
yeah, it was.
Boise's a cool town. I've driven through there a couple of times.
I believe it is now. Then it was a
Oh,
curious space.
Right.
It was just very different. I mean,
Yeah.
when I moved there, I had, starting off,
Mhm.
cutting about hair. I had my head shaved up to here and long hair that, was
Like
kinda-
punk rock kind of deal.
more kind of like a Robert Smith from The Cure kind of deal.
Yeah.
And I got there and I was like, show up with my skater stuff, and I'm like, wow, cowboys exist. I didn't think they did.
It's
It
like-
was-
you're like it's like
It was
kind of
a
like
culture clash.
I'm thinking of
So-
Pauly Shore and Son-in-Law, of like kind of like city boy going out to the country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say city boy because, I mean, I'm not from Philly, and it's a
Right,
small town.
okay.
I lived outside, but
Yeah.
it was just it was a completely different, East Coast, West Coast thing. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, this is
Wide open spaces.
not what I was,
Yeah.
it was new, like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I had been out this way previously on a train ride across the country
Okay.
with my mother, and my brothers and sisters, but
Mm-hmm.
it was moving there. I was like, wow, okay, and it was a complete shock.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then all of a sudden, you just got an opportunity to travel and you did it. That's
Pretty
that's
much,
really
and
neat.
then
Man.
that started
Yeah.
the ball rolling, and then
It just kind of spiraled, and you learned
Exactly.
Spanish, and then
There you
after
go.
that, you decided to come back and go to school for Spanish.
yep,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah, and you got your master's in it.
got my BA, got my master's in it. Got,
In what is it? Literature? Was it
Yeah.
in literature? Okay.
Yep, they're on literature.
Okay. Do you have a preferred Spanish book, like your all-time favorite?
No.
Are you like a big Quixote fan?
No. Nah, I loathe the question of what's your favorite, because it varies. There are different times, different points in life that you identify
yeah.
with different things differently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And there are books that, or films that at one point I'm like, wow, this is just an amazing film. And I still find a lot of different things amazing, but not necessarily that I'd say this is my all-time favorite.
No,
something
absolutely.
I kind of run away from. I'm like, nah, I don't have an all-time favorite.
Well, I mean, I
momentary
over respond. Well, with people like that. No, I studied film for my undergrad. So what's your favorite movie? And I'm like, well, what time period? What country? I'm really into Italian neorealism.
And then they just look at
Yeah.
you and they're like, "Ugh, why do you have to make everything so complicated? Never mind.
Yeah, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. Yeah,
We
I
can
know.
talk at another point. I'm going to go actually have a conversation.
Does that happen to you a lot? Where you're just like because people are like, oh God, they're like, what? Can you just have a normal conversation and not overly like theorize or academicize or academicize or so you'd have to be so pedantic about everything? Does that happen to you? I don't know. I feel like that happens to me a lot.
Times
Maybe
it
it's just my
happens,
personality.
times it doesn't.
I tend to overthink things. I like to be like, sometimes I feel like I'm being a show off, but I'm like, I just like talking about this stuff, man.
As long as you enjoy it.
All right. Well, luckily, in the
It's working
class,
for you.
in the classes, that's what I enjoyed about the Portuguese classes was that we could talk about a lot of the stuff. We got exposure to a lot of music. I took the popular Brazilian music class with you,
Yep.
and it was and it's not like top 40 kind of stuff.
Really, I didn't even notice. I was just teaching it.
Right. I mean, but I think that's
No,
that's
yeah.
kind of how you go into it, thinking it's like popular Brazilian music.
Well, and you do get some of that. I mean, but
Yeah.
we start. I mean, it's a.
You get a bit of everything.
Yeah, exactly. It starts at kind of end of the 19th century, comes up through. Main focus was on the contemporary, but
We looked at African-inspired music, right? Like music from Africa. Very,
Well,
very basic stuff.
what we're looking at when we started the class,
Yeah.
a lot of that was more centered around kind of how samba started.
Okay,
What
right.
were the different
right.
influences?
Yeah.
And how that was pulled in from the Afro-Brazilian population,
Mhm.
and then looking at the times periods, right? So
Yeah.
we're talking more beginning of the 20th century, but
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then but a lot of it was also contextualizing it.
yeah,
A lot of this music, right?
yeah.
The big ones were obviously during the dictatorship, right? Are you giving me a look right now like
No,
you're
no.
gonna quiz me?
No, I'm actually just watching to see. I'm like, all right,
It's stuck.
It's stuck. This is good.
You did teach me
All
something,
right,
Jeremy. No, you did teach me
We're
something.
like, oh yeah, and we studied some music.
And we studied some music. Now tell me what it was again. No, it did stick because I mean I think what what I got a lot out of that degree was how to think critically, which is the hopes and expectations, right?
Actually, it's probably the most useful part, right?
Right.
I mean, there's a
that-
language and culture component that.
Yeah.
But in the back of it all, what we're hopefully doing is teaching you to engage critically with your surroundings and what you're learning or what you're being told
Absolutely.
at multiple levels. Because
Absolutely.
if you're not, then what's the point?
Well, I mean, my question is that supposed to be happening at the undergraduate level? Because I feel like a lot of the time, maybe not with you guys,
Well, of course, it's supposed to be happening.
but I feel like a lot of the time it doesn't happen, and that happens not just maybe. I don't think it's a UNN thing. I think it's a big thing in general. I think people go in and being like not prepared for a lot of these things, how to think critically, more so just an obsession with getting the grade.
Well, I mean, I think that. Well, I mean, this gets into like a really wide group of things, but
Yeah.
to say, well, they come in not prepared. I mean, you're right. There are different levels of preparation, and depending on what types of courses you're teaching,
Right,
you see
yeah.
a very varied group, and you see that in a more pronounced fashion at state universities, let's say,
Mhm.
or I mean, I've taught, for example, when I taught at Vanderbilt,
Mhm.
it was a more homogenous group in
Yeah.
terms of education levels and things like that.
Right.
So preparation is one thing, but that's not really what you're talking about. What you're
Okay.
talking about is, okay, what is the expectation? And the expectation from an education, right?
Mhm.
What do we expect when we're done with an undergraduate education? Is it, okay, I'm doing these courses so that at the end, this is the job I have?
Yeah.
Or is it a more open idea of I'm learning how to think so that I can apply that
Right.
in multiple ways?
Mhm.
And I think that that's actually a debate that is happening nationally at the university level,
Okay.
because it goes back to questions of the humanities, like now, right? I mean, most humanities departments, colleges, etc., are in a financial space that is not really great.
Yeah.
And part of that is because it's, okay, but what's the use of a degree in? And be it art, be it Spanish, be it this. And it's moving beyond this question of a utilitarian degree and moving into the question of, okay, it's exactly that. You're being taught to think and think critically, and that has an application across the board in your life,
Exactly.
in your job.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot, I think, of what's going on generally, and
Okay.
how it's being weighed.
I mean, the reason I asked, I think more than anything, as well, is there was a lot of the time I was like, I felt like maybe there's people who, not necessarily me, but like there's a lot of people who are just kind of like, they're just not quite catching, and they have to play catch up a lot of the time in a lot of different areas. You know, I'm seeing people in another program that I'm in, seeing kind of like they're having to make up a lot of the stuff that some people are already prepared for. You know, they just kind of, but that's just different backgrounds. It's not something you really can. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean those things
it's
are
not a preparation thing.
what no,
Yeah.
it is a preparation thing. That is
Okay.
to say, because
Right.
people have varying access to education, you have
Yeah.
varying experiences,
Yeah.
and when you bring together a group to study something,
Okay.
you're all going to be approaching it. I mean, not everyone has had the same formation, right?
Right. Right.
So that's the nature of a classroom, and
Yeah.
they vary in different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
They vary greater or less, but
Okay.
the other end of it is, what do you want to get out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you wanna learn. You wanna be able to expand your mind. I mean, that's how I feel.
Excellent. Happy to hear that.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you are. And I think a lot of what these courses did, what I really enjoyed was that how passionate you guys were about the subject matter. I mean, you also went to Brazil. I'm assuming often. I mean, when you were out, you were either at a conference or in Brazil.
I mean, I get to Brazil fairly regularly.
How
Yes.
often do you get down there?
Just depends on the year.
Okay.
I mean, once a year, twice a year. It just depends. It's
Okay.
a question of work schedule, teaching schedule, conferences,
Yeah.
invited stuff, whatnot. So
Yeah.
it varies greatly.
Yeah, and the program itself is, I mean, it's an amazing program. A lot of people don't realize that Portuguese is such a neat language. I mean, I learned about it because of undergraduate students that, when I was an undergrad, that were at UNM taking classes, and there'd be all the international students. Then I saw a bunch of American kids speaking Portuguese to each other. And I would be like, what are they? It's not Spanish. I know Spanish, and that's not it. So be sitting there trying to understand, and I felt super left out. I felt super left out. And then I met some Brazilians.
Mhm.
I met some Brazilians, and they sounded super cool again. Marina was one of them. Then she became a good friend of mine, and they were suggesting, like, oh, you should take some of the classes. From what I heard, that you learn Portuguese pretty quickly if you're taking these classes. And I think it's set up in a way where, like, it's great. It's great pedagogy, and it's just like you're just learning. You're learning quickly, and you're learning well, and it sticks.
Well, I mean, in our specific program, right? A lot of
Yeah.
I mean, there are different kind of, I guess you say, vias or tracks, right, to get you through. So
Yeah.
if you're coming in and you're fluent in Spanish, I mean, a lot of it is adjusting, right?
Mhm.
You need to adjust because there's a lot of parallels between the two languages.
Yeah.
But then, there's also a whole lot that's very different. So at first you're like, okay, what is that? Then you tune your ear just a little bit to it, and you're like, all right, I'm getting a bunch of that. And then you sit down and you're like, okay, I don't think I'm getting anything anymore, because then you start to realize the differences.
Yeah.
But in terms of the program, there were these different tracks. So you can do specifically Portuguese that's geared towards speakers of Spanish, which in
Yeah.
a semester it's intensive, but it gets you from A to B. And in the end, when you come out, you're rolling pretty well. You're doing pretty, you've got a pretty
Yeah.
solid grasp to then be able to go into and move beyond, okay, the language study. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's still there, but then we start to work at that language study in kind of a more as I say, the more communicative approach, right? Of, okay, let's
Yeah.
use it, but let's look at these different cultural issues. Let's
Yeah.
start engaging with these other materials.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like after one semester, I took the Spanish intensive one, the
Yep.
Portuguese for Spanish speakers. After one semester, I was able to go. I studied abroad in Spain, and I got to go to Portugal, and they thought I was Brazilian, which is neat. But like I was able to kind of I knew enough to be able to get by and convince them. I don't know if they were just being nice.
It might have been the Brazilian shirt you were wearing the whole time that you were in Portugal.
No,
No?
there was no
Okay.
Brazilian shirt.
I thought maybe you had the flag. You
Just
were
like they're like Brazil, maybe,
Brazil,
or might have been like,
soccer shirt.
or maybe I just had like darker complected, and maybe they thought, oh, you're like, oh, you're Brazilian. I don't know, but what I will say is that it helped me.
Okay.
After one semester, I feel like I learned so much that I was able to kind of go in and be able to kind of
Yeah.
get by in a foreign country
Well,
where.
and Portugal is even going to be more tricky than, for example, if you would have went to Brazil, because
Hmm. Yeah,
the accent,
the
right,
accent. Oh, the accent in
is
Portugal is.
completely. I mean, it's another space. I mean,
Yeah. Since then, I've
if
kind
you
of been even more or less so, less so to I can't even understand it. It's hard. It's more difficult since I went to Portugal to understand it. I think I've been trained more into Brazilian Portuguese.
yeah.
That's what it
Yeah,
is.
I mean, and if you
Yeah.
want to compare it to English, right?
Yeah.
Take, I don't know, talking about films, right? Watch a film like Train Spotting, and you're like,
Hmm.
no, wait, I speak English, but oh my God, what are they saying? I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure this out,
You have to have
right?
subtitles on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So Brazilians do the
And
same thing, I'm assuming,
and
with the Portuguese.
well,
Yeah.
there's moments that you're like, I know it's Portuguese, yes, but okay, I missed a little bit here, I missed a little bit
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and it becomes perturbing because you're like, no, wait, I know this language. Hold on, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
it happens with Spanish. It happens with when you're talking about moving between
Hmm.
these spaces, and at times it's more drastic. At times it's not. It has to do with a bunch of different things. What's
Yeah.
the register that's being spoken in?
Yeah.
What's the educational level? Is the speaker?
Oh, so it's just
But
yeah,
there's all
absolutely.
kinds of stuff, right?
And then
Plays
Brazil,
in.
and Brazil has so much influence, like external influence, right? It has, I mean, the indigenous. How much of the was it more of the African influence on the language in Brazil, or was there also like an equal? I mean, this I'm talking
Well,
about linguistics here.
I'm
You're
not
not
sure what it is.
what the
What is it?
influence
Okay,
influence on Portuguese in Brazil, like Brazilian Portuguese.
I
Would
couldn't give you a
Yeah,
quantifiable like this.
yeah, yeah,
There's more of an Afro influence here, the
yeah.
indigenous influence here.
Okay.
I mean,
And there's Portuñol on the borders and stuff
there's
like that.
definitely some Portuñol on the borders. If you go down south to places like Chuy, which is just because I know the south part
Hmm.
a bit more of traveling between. So crossing over to Uruguay, I mean,
Yeah.
Portuñol is just it's king.
I always remember what you told me about Uruguay and Paraguay. Was it mostly just Uruguay? I think you said there's just nothing going on there.
It's just super chill.
But I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean by chill?
It's exactly that. It's a very chill country.
It just.
I mean, at
okay.
least my experience of it. Now, mind you, I mean, I have, but I mean, I've driven the length of the coast and
Yeah.
stopped in different places and whatnot. It's just a really mellow place. It's not very big, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the population of the country is equal to a very
Okay.
large city.
Okay. So it's. I mean, it's
but
a small population in
yeah,
general.
it's not a huge country, but it's a nice chill place. It's
Kind of land of mañana ish.
uh,
Well, we'll
no,
get to it.
well, I don't know if I. It's
Yeah.
just it's just that it's. I mean, when I've been down there, and mind you, mostly I've been either down in Montevideo or I've been down around
Mhm.
the beach areas.
Yeah.
And the beach has its own thing, right?
Yeah.
Beaches are like, usually the beach is more chill unless
Yeah.
you're. I'm not there in a high season normally. It's
Yeah.
not party time and whatnot, and
That's
that's
not your.
not why
That's not
I'm
your
going.
scene.
It's not. I'm going down to just kind of
Okay.
relax. So maybe it's what I'm looking for. And it's
Absolutely.
not actually reflective of anything. I don't know.
Was that
But-
ever your scene? Well, in the '90s and on the East Coast in Seattle, I'm sure it was a crazier time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different time.
A different time.
Yeah. No. I mean, Seattle in the '90s was a really, really cool place.
Well, I mean,
It was
yeah,
like
it's like
something. It
you
was
had Nirvana was big then, and
not even a little until they were done. No longer.
well, it was
right?
only
But-
Cobain died in '94. Was it '94?
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, it was '94.
Yeah, it's the thing right in there.
Huh?
Yep.
Yep.
But, and I was over there.
Yeah,
Kind of tragic.
kind of tragic. I think is one of the most. Kurt Cobain is one of the best musicians of all time. I love the music.
Yeah.
I think there's. I've heard a lot about like the conspiracy theories and this and that, which is also pretty. It's kind of neat to listen to. And Courtney Love, she was an interesting cat, as well. That whole thing,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was.
alternative rock was such an amazing time, in the '90s.
Yeah, no, I mean, grunge was just.
Grunge, yeah. I mean,
King.
alternative because I'm thinking of like bands like Garbage as well. You have Bush, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna kind of put my hill down and say, no, I want to call it grunge because I was there in the '90s, and I was like, it was like an identity, the whole kind of like grunge thing.
Was it?
It
Okay.
wasn't as much open to like this is alternative rock, but it was.
So it was grunge.
It was yeah. There was a whole kind of style in the Pacific Northwest at that time.
It was a
and whatnot.
culture. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was you know. It was that.
Was it
like
what we
this-
think of today, like the clothing and the music, and I mean, was there stuff that just kind of is completely misconstrued and
What
as
well,
far
well,
as far as what it was like then?
I think that would have to ask of since it's what we think of today. I'm not sure what you're thinking.
When you're thinking,
so
okay,
it's
I don't
kinda
know. I
hard.
mean, you live today. I figured that maybe you knew. I mean, just kind of like there was just kind of, it's been kind of lumped. A lot of people will say, oh, it's punk rock, and I'm say like I definitely say it's
No.
not.
No,
It's not. So now I'm saying it's alternative, but it's not. It was just grunge. And as far as like the culture, it being like what were the kids like back then? Like what were like it was just like teenagers at any point in history. They're just kind of like resisting, just doing their own thing, hanging out. I don't know. I don't know what
mean,
maybe
it's very marked by a Gen X kind of
right.
point of view. I think that no, it has changed actually.
Mhm.
How kind of that what the view on what's going on, the position in the world and whatnot. I mean, grunge, Seattle at that time, it was
I mean, Seattle now. I mean, Seattle now is this place where it's like,
it's something else.
it's taken over by Amazon and all these young.
It no longer has that grimy edge that it had. In
So
the
it was just a
90s.
grimy city.
Yeah, I mean, when I say grimy edge, not in a despective way, but
No.
more so like it had some vitality to it and whatnot. No,
Okay.
Seattle's all right now, but it's a very different beast than it was back then.
I mean, I personally think it's a nightmare of a city. I mean, it's this mammoth of just. It's the fastest growing metro area in the country. At this point,
It's like competing. Portland isn't overtaking it at this point because everybody
Mm.
that can't afford Seattle went down to
we went
Portland.
into Portland. Portland's not the
Not
same.
really.
Portland's not the same. Portland's not the same city it used to be either. Portland is.
That's very true.
Portland is no longer weird as they would call it. There's a lot of high rises going up, a lot of gentrification, overpriced this. I mean, driving around to find parking in either of those cities is a nightmare if you're
Yeah.
driving there.
I the last time that I
Yeah.
was in Portland was in 1994 actually,
It wasn't any far.
and I was there at a lowrider show.
A lowrider show?
Yeah,
That's kind of cool, man.
yeah, it was, and it was a lot of fun. We took a
Lowrider
some
show in
shows-
Portland. I mean, I don't think you could find that out there right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
we were at a lowrider show there, and we had gone over, and the guy that drove, he had I don't even know what year. It was like it was a Cadillac, older Cadillac with hydros on it and all kinds of stuff, and he parked it.
Mm-hmm.
Had spokes. It had the whole thing going on, and I think he made it a little bit too obvious that he had a lot of money sunk into that car.
Yeah.
And when we came out, it was no longer there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I mean, was the Chinatown? What was that place like? Because it's abandoned.
Well, I wasn't
And-
actually in Portland.
Oh.
I had just gotten back from Spain, and I had stopped in Boise to see my mother. I was there. Some guys I knew were like, "Hey, we're going on a lowrider tour down to Utah, then over to Portland, and then back
Mm-hmm.
to go to car shows." And I
Yeah.
was like, I'll roll with you, sure."
Yeah.
And so we drove down to Utah for a show. We drove over to Portland. They stole the car. And then we rode back to Boise so that I could take off to go up back to college. And it was, and we did that in the back of a pickup truck because
Yeah.
one guy had a pickup truck that was like probably for like a 50s truck.
Yeah.
It was slammed to the ground and chopped and everything. And the other car was stolen. So there was 6 of us, I think? 4 of us in the back of the truck. And it was not
I really want to see a
pleasant.
picture of you then, man.
It was not pleasant.
I want to see a picture of what you mostly what you dress like. I'm just curious.
I don't know if that was a good look or not.
Oh, was
but
it? I think
was-
it's a great look. I wish we should bring that look back.
Right.
We should totally do that, and I'm sure it would be all your students would love it.
Yeah, I'm guessing that they'd be just
Do you
like,
do
that is not
Halloween?
loving.
Do you do
No.
Halloween? No, you don't do Halloween.
No.
Oh
I
man,
mean, I hand out candy, but
Y-
that's pretty much the
that's
extent of
okay.
it.
You don't dress up.
No.
No. The only time I ever saw you kind of in any way dress up was you were like dress up. You wore purple on purpose when Prince died.
No.
Yeah, and I was like, and then
Gotta
you
do
put up
that.
on the end of your slideshow, you put Prince's picture, and I was
Sad
like,
day.
it was a sad day, man. Prince is
Yep.
speaking of like great rock stars,
Yeah.
you know,
Very true.
amazing guitarist.
I mean,
He would shred on the guitar.
he was total. Yeah, he was quite amazing.
Yeah.
I agree.
We had fun in those classes, man. We would talk about music. We talk about film. We did queer theory, right?
Well,
Through Latin American
I think
Latin
the
American
course,
film.
one of the courses that you did well, as an undergrad, I think with the undergrad program, it was just that. I think the only
With
one
you, it was
had
just that one.
that one, but then in the graduate, it was Latin American queer film,
Queer film, Brazilian cinema.
Brazilian cinema course, the Brazilian music course.
Yeah, and then was it just those?
Not positive.
You were off for a
I
semester.
I think that you also may have taken my human rights course in Latin American cinema or not.
No,
Uh,
I didn't take that one. Oh, you had a masculinity course.
oh yeah,
And
you
I
took
heard-
my masculinity course.
I didn't
No,
take
you
that.
didn't.
No, I didn't take that. But I heard students just nonstop talking about triangles. And I felt so out of the loop with that. Can you tell me what was going on with that?
Can I tell you? It's probably not something to get into in a radio show but it was just going back to theories by Sedgwick on
Okay.
triangulation, looking at 19th century English so looking at literature and how homosocial relations, how they were represented
Yeah.
you have basically a triangulation between the homosocial relation between two men, and so then the one male would marry the sister a lot of times of the other male, and
Huh.
it wasn't about the relationship with the woman, but rather more the relationship of cementing two men.
Okay.
I guess that's how I
That makes
explain it in a
that makes
nutshell.
sense. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no, there were a couple of students that got very enthralled by the idea of triangulation.
I remember one specifically that would always bring up the Holy Trinity.
So
Yeah, and that was always very interesting because I kept hearing triangles. Because that was the first semester I was there, and I didn't take that class.
okay.
I took Leida's class
Okay.
and Encontros, I think, or something.
Yeah,
like
the overview class.
yeah. So I did that
Brazilian.
one, and and so I missed that one,
Mm-hmm.
but I heard all about it, and from then on, they kind of tied into a lot of what we did. You focused a lot on like the masculinity, sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a lot of like that ties into a lot of how you look at film,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, that's the book that I'm currently editing
Mm-hmm.
is that. It's looking at
Okay.
Brazilian masculinity, so contemporary representations of masculinity and how it ties in with these questions, what I'm calling a kind of a resurgence of neo-authoritarian masculinity. So this idea
Ooh.
that, okay, these films, they're actually promoting the idea of the return of this.
Chauvinistic kind of.
Well, it's more
Man's
than that.
man?
It's actually, you could say, yeah, it's the man's man or whatnot, but it's more than that. It's a stance that's linked into, okay, responding with aggression and violence to things. So it's not
Mhm.
as solely that it influences like the personal sphere,
Yeah.
but then also that comes over into the public sphere. So
Okay.
it's looking at films that are representing this. Okay, we need, that is, say we being in Brazil, there's this need for this male figure to put things back in order.
Right.
So
right. To be in
it's-
control or to restructure.
Exactly. So
Okay. The dependence on the man.
I don't know if I'd say it's a dependence on the man. It's a specific kind of way of positing who, because it's also not any man, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the white heterosexual male
Mhm.
that is kind of representing that middle upper class.
Okay.
And it's a repositioning or a kind of rooting of
Yeah.
that man,
Okay.
right? That he's the answer. And so what you have, I mean, what I look at are how these cultural products, there's, what did I say? It's not a simple, innocent, yeah, I saw this story.
Yeah.
Especially when we start looking at film, right? I mean, you're talking about, in some cases, thousands, millions of viewers,
Yeah.
right? And when we're talking about that, that means the reach is actually pretty great. So how is it then, when you start reading these things together, what is it that you see happening, and that how does that dovetail with things that are happening politically and socially? Is it dialoguing with the changes? Is it a very conservative approach that's resisting them? Is it promoting them? And when you start to kind of look across the board as more as, right, overarchingly, okay, what's happening, then there's a lot of power there.
Okay. Absolutely.
But yes, going back to where I started, gender and sexuality are central to a lot of what I work at.
Okay, because so we looked at queer Latin American cinema.
Yeah.
Or queer cinema in Latin America. That's what it was. That was an interesting course as well. But now you're doing horror film.
Yeah.
Horror film.
Where I'm moving towards in my next book project. So
Okay.
Looking at, but it's different but the same. That is to say, I'm looking at the horror film genre, but again, looking at through this lens of gender, sexuality.
So you're looking at gender and sexuality still?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think I spoken to somebody, and somebody said something about capitalism in there.
Well,
there's sections.
So the course isn't, any course that you teach isn't necessarily this is what I research, right? I mean, it dovetails with pieces of it, and then other pieces, because if it was only about that, then it's like, I'm only going to teach the one thing that I want to teach because this is what I'm researching right now. It wouldn't work very well. Not everybody's interests align with mine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, so this course is, we're starting out actually, there's kind of an overview. We look back at some of the more traditional films.
Yeah.
Horror films. And then but right now we're looking at neoliberalism and how different horror films are engaging with the question of neoliberalism.
Okay. In Latin America.
In Latin America.
Okay. Latin America.
Yeah, it's all either in Spanish or Portuguese.
Okay, because it's a cross-section course, right?
It's cross-listed, yeah.
Cross-listed, sorry.
Yep.
So, the classes are completely in Portuguese or in Spanish.
This is a graduate course, so I move actually between
both
the languages because it's a cross-listed course and we're dealing with both texts.
So use the language that you're most comfortable with out of those two.
No, I use both.
You use both. I mean, but the students.
The students usually, they use the one they're most comfortable with.
Yeah.
Some of the students start to experiment, like, oh, okay, I'm doing Portuguese, but this Spanish thing is kind of interesting, or vice versa. I've only been doing Spanish, but this Portuguese is kind of interesting. I'll give it a run.
Yeah.
But it's, again, once you kind of tune your ear, production is difficult, right? But understanding, that works pretty well.
Well, you always have to kind of like. In your courses, you do like a brief summary of like film production, and technical things, right?
I always start classes out with, okay.
Yeah, because not everyone understands film.
Yeah, well, and film language, because if you don't understand how to speak about it right, then it's really difficult. It becomes this.
When the camera does this versus it's tilting.
Well, that
or it's little things.
Or you want to talk about okay. Well, it was an extreme close-up, so how does that work? And they're saying, oh, wow, that really made me feel this way. And you're like, okay, but let's start getting into that why, and let's look at it visually. Let's look at it in terms of soundtrack. Let's look at it in these other ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sound is big. Yeah. Sound is big, angles, lighting.
All of that. And if you don't have the vocabulary to discuss it, then it will remain with, wow, that was something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so first thing to do is always set up the vocabulary to how do I discuss actually film, because for the most part, most people haven't been exposed to that side unless they did a degree in media arts.
Right. So I just kind of, I just know. I was like, I know this.
I just fell into this.
I was fortunate enough to be able to have that training or that expertise or that knowledge in the vocabulary.
Yeah,
and knowing how to film production.
And that's huge.
Well, it definitely helped. Yeah, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
because it was. I once I kind of was trained to do that. I more naturally could find certain things. You know,
Well,
I
you
could be like,
look.
oh, there's a pattern here,
Yeah.
or even the speed of editing
Yeah.
and editing back and forth between certain shots. What does this mean?
Yeah.
What you realize is like with any production, almo- almost everything's intentional. It's very rare that something's not. You know, from the light, from the color, from the why is this out of focus to why is it in
Yeah.
focus? Why is the camera shaking? Why is it not shaking? The tracking, the tilting, the whole thing.
Yeah. No, it's not innocent,
Yeah,
right? It's. I
yeah.
mean, all of it is done with a purpose in mind,
Hmm.
and you need to train yourself to look at it that way,
Yeah.
because otherwise, I mean, it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I miss sitting down and watching
Yeah.
a film and being like,
Mindlessly, just
"Oh,
being
that
able
was
to.
awesome," but now I'm like, "Oh, that was a really great
I
edit.
know, no, I
That
know.
was an amazing shot.
Well, my
Look
girlfriend
how
kind
this
of gives me a
happened."
hard time about that. She's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Well, I think it's really great, but like, what the implications of, or what does this mean, or when was this made?" I asked her, "What was the director? When was it made?" I need to know all this stuff to contextualize it,
Yeah.
because it means something more.
Yeah. Well, or just simply you're looking at, okay, there was a transition, and look at this is a really great transition because look how this I don't know, shape was
Yeah,
paired with the one in the next, and it just made for this seamless transition that are two completely different
yeah, yeah,
contexts,
yeah,
but yet it worked.
yeah,
And so then you start like thinking about, okay, technique wise, that was really amazing. How did they do that? Okay, now why did they do that? Now,
yeah,
so you lose that
yeah.
idea of being lost in the film, right? In
Absolutely.
the experience at times.
I mean, at the same time, like if I really like it the first time, I'll buy it and then watch it again, and then the second time I kind of get
Let go.
lost, let go a little bit more. Like films like have you seen The Witch?
Yeah.
The Witch. I mean, the amazing sound
Yeah.
and cinematography is amazing. Just
Very
the
much so.
sound, the use of sound in that, or the absence, the silence,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, amazing, right? The lighting and color in moonlight.
Well, have you seen the Chilean film Post Mortem?
No, I've not. Is that one of the films that you have in your class, or?
I taught it in a Latin American Studies class
Okay.
recently.
Okay.
So,
And what
but
about it?
it's a Lorraine film, Pablo Lorraine from Chile. But it's one that the sounds, because
Yeah.
on screen at times you're pretty much, it's just a mundane scene.
Yeah.
For like there's one where it's the bathroom window, the
Yeah.
protagonist is taking a shower on the other side of the window, and the camera's just framing it still.
Yeah.
And it's a really long shot, but all you hear is breaking windows and all this violence in the background
Mm-hmm.
because they're destroying the house across the street,
Yeah.
but the camera is just
Still.
still, and
Mhm.
it doesn't turn. It refuses to look at the violence.
So
but
there's
yet you
something
hear it.
happening, and you just.
And it's when it's for sound, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, there's a whole second story in this film,
Right. Happening.
in the film,
And
or in the sound.
that's contributing to the story.
Immensely.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
You constantly need to stop and kind of like place yourself. Okay, what's going on in the soundscape here?
Right.
What's the movement happening? What am I?
Yeah. Whereas if you're not trained, you'll be sitting there and maybe being like, "Oh, this is really boring."
Yeah.
Right, and you're not maybe paying attention to there's a reason that this is happening. A lot of these long takes, I mean, there for one, if it's like a very still shot or silence or just walking through a field, it's meant to make you feel like you're there.
Yeah.
It's meant to make you feel the progression of time. For one, how long this takes, right? So you're feeling that, and then it's meant to make you kind of snap out of your the illusion that you're under, right? The spell that you're under. You like come back. You're like, wow, I'm really aware of that I'm watching the film again, and then
Right.
it brings you back to the fact that you're like, oh, okay, or it makes you focus on something that's really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I think also, of recent Latin American film, right?
Yeah.
I mean, kind of the transition to the 21st century.
Yeah.
There was a huge explosion in these really highly edited, fast-paced films.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, the standards, right? Amores Perros,
Mm-hmm.
Cidade de Deus,
Yeah.
and the Sequestro Express from Venezuela.
Yeah.
And they're films that are just on the go. Da, da, da. And then now we've seen this kind of move back,
Yeah.
where everything's starting to slow down.
Yeah.
And it's been happening for a while. It's not anything like the last
All of a
couple
sudden it's
of
happening.
years.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it also makes you conscious of, okay, daily life is hectic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm being trained by, that gadget, my phone, the computer,
Yeah.
that there's 5 things going on and there's constant stimulation and this plethora of stimuli.
Yeah.
And some of these films are just saying,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
want you to be conscious that a 5 or 10 minute long shot
Yeah.
that you're watching, and you're sitting there getting really nervous because you're like, okay, is something going to happen? It's
Mhm.
also a comment on us. I mean, it's
How we
definitely,
go, go, go we are.
yeah,
Absolutely.
It's the way we've been,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
a question of how we were being trained.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's commentary on our daily lives. I think going back to the horror film, I had taken a horror film class in my undergrad, and we did different sections on. They were split up more of like, oh, we're gonna do zombies, we're gonna do werewolves, we're gonna do the serial killer, the slasher film, and the commentary that had on society or like what is this a critique of?
okay.
And the zombies were always, a critique of our relationship with technology,
Mm-hmm.
and how we're just kind of we're losing touch with the real world and just kind of running or just kind of going through life, not really paying attention to anything else, and just kind of focus on one thing when there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
We watched Shaun of the Dead for that one.
Okay.
Although it was a comedy, it wasn't more. We could have watched any other. There's a ton
Countless amount of.
yeah films, but we chose that one because it's more obvious.
Okay.
Because he's going through like the routine, the first few scenes, he's going through his routine, and he's super unaware of everything that's going on. But as the film goes on, he's going through that same routine, doing the same things, but now he's hyper aware,
Yeah.
right? Because the world's ending. Right, so you're just kind of, it brings you out. It makes you redo the same thing, but with different eyes, a different perspective. And film can do that. A lot of people see film as entertainment. What I like about your classes, which is, I'm sure it's there and it's kind of lost, but I like about your classes that I think it helps remind people that it's, for one, it's art.
Mm-hmm.
It's art. And two, there's a lot of commentary going on in a lot of films. Even I remember I had a film professor who told me that Mean Girls was a great representation and depiction of the difficulties of growing up as a teenager in the 2000s, and the difficulties of having to deal with the social hierarchy in a class and being popular and the crazy things teenagers will do to get attention, and it's a good time capsule of that. It's also, and Tina Fey is pretty good at that in general. I think she, more than just being a comedian, she does a lot of really good film.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen Mean Girls?
No, I haven't.
Right, but it's one of those
Sorry.
films that it's one of those films that it's overseen as being like,
Okay.
there's the Clueless films in the 90s.
Yeah.
There was Jawbreaker. What else is another one? We talked about the
Yeah, we were
Heathers
talking about Heathers,
in the
yeah.
80s. The Heathers. What else? Valley Girl. All those, those
Yeah.
those ones that just kind of they at the time they may be just seen as like these pop films or just kind of popular films, but if you look at them, you look back at Ferris Bueller and you're like, what does this mean? This means
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
This is very telling of the time that it was made.
Yeah.
And it's also art. It took a lot to make this production, and it's countless hours of just kind of creativity that's going into it.
Yeah, going back to the zombie.
Yeah.
question, and it's just stuck in my mind because I just got done teaching it. But,
Oh, yeah.
there's like there's a triptych of Plaga Zumbi.
Uh-huh.
It's an Argentine series. It's actually available on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's
Like
not- it's-
zombie plague is
yeah,
what it's
zombie
called.
plague,
Yeah.
and it's not even low budget. It's somewhere beyond ultra low budget. I think the first one. What I read on it, the first one was done with $50 in 1997, which seems like it's a little bit exaggerated. Because I don't
Yeah.
know how you could possibly do a movie with $50.
Right.
But it's not if it's more than that, it's a stone throw away from that.
Yeah.
But that's when we were working with this idea of neoliberalism, etc.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, it's a comedy. It's
Mhm.
not like this
Yeah.
horror flick.
Right.
It's got your action scenes that
Mhm.
are
Fast
filmed in
paced, and
filmed in an interesting fashion, let's say, on with $50 and edited.
I gotta check it
various
out.
way.
Okay.
But there's actually quite a bit there, and if you read them, because it's 97, 2001, and 2012,
Mm-hmm.
the change between the first two and then the last one, it's super interesting.
Because just the progression of them and the production quality,
Well,
or
there's
just
some
the
production.
story.
There's a bit of production quality change. I wouldn't call it extreme, but it's definitely improved. They
Yeah.
they added some special effects in the end, and things like that. So
Okay.
it definitely, the budget went up quite
Yeah.
a bit because they're
Yeah.
But
Neoliberalism, though, tying into it.
well, and tying in, it's the first two, the commentaries of working with community, of community building,
Yeah.
things like that, versus the last one, how it starts to lose that. And it's one of these that you kind of wonder, okay, 97, 2001, you're going into the big crisis in Argentina.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what exactly, how do we set all of this up?
Yeah.
So these are interesting questions to sit down and discuss, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you read it? What's it saying? Maybe
Yeah.
in the end you're like, okay, that last one is just kind of, they're just trying to get a last hurrah out of it because
Yeah.
they could.
They're just making more
But
for the sake.
there might be something more there, and these are definitely things that are worth sitting down and looking at.
Mhm. Well, I think I remember one time you said that there's the intentions of the filmmaker and then how the audience interprets it. And I think you even went to the extent of saying, I don't care what their intentions are. Well, all that matters is how I'm interpreting it.
No, I don't. Actually, I don't know if I went quite that far. That
I think it
how
was
interpret-
close.
I mean, it was the intentionality of it. It's
Mhm.
interesting to know the intentions, but that does not necessarily mean
Yeah.
where it ends up.
Okay.
And it isn't
Right.
even necessarily my interpretation. My personal interpretation
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily matter. But how does an audience engage with it? How do you read it afterwards?
Mhm.
How does it move? Also, because what the intention was, and then how it actually enters into, and how society interprets it, right? Is all. Once it's released, the director no longer has any control, and
Mhm.
the director might say, "Well, that's not what I meant,
Yeah.
but that's what everybody understood." Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In the end, if that's what everybody's understanding,
Right.
then that meaning is going to be attached to it.
Right.
Right.
Regardless of what the intention was.
Yeah. So, but I would move away from it only matters how I interpret it, because ultimately,
Right.
that becomes a little bit too individualistic. Like,
Well, I being
think
the
I feel-
audience,
Okay.
right? Society.
Yeah.
Right? I know. I didn't quite mean you.
Okay.
You know. No.
Well, no, because
Yeah.
I mean, it is a question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most things, it's like, well, I liked it, and then it becomes this
Mhm.
personal engagement with it, and this is what I think it is.
Yeah.
And I may see things in a film that personally affect me because it's an experience I had. It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
But that's not going to necessarily. That's not enough to guide how I interpret the whole film, because
Yeah.
I'm trying to open it up to a wider
Okay.
discussion,
Okay.
socially and politically.
Okay. What do you? So, do you remember Carl Morta? Old professor of Mexican cinema at UNM.
Yeah, I met him.
You
I
did?
never. Yeah, actually at a conference, and not.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was my Mexican cinema professor, and then I met with
Lucky
him.
you.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Very intelligent. Knows a lot about film. We met for coffee a couple times after that, and I remember one of the times we started talking about the Marvel movies,
Mm-hmm.
and I have you seen any of them? Are you a fan? Doesn't matter.
More recent ones.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Some of them, but like he told me, he's like, oh yeah, they're all 9/11 films, post like, because of they're all kind of like post 9/11 buildings being crashed into, urban violence, just these really just kind of acclimating the audience to war. the idea of war and how civil war and conflict from within,
Okay.
which is I always found very interesting. I mean, do you have a take on that now that I've just kind of said that, or you haven't really had enough time to really sit with it?
Well, no, I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, again, I go back to the things that I work on a lot of times.
Yeah.
And my read on a lot of these has much more to do with, okay, what is the question of the individual, a lot of times male.
Yeah.
We have had just recently, right, okay, like Wonder Woman came out.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. What'd you think of that?
um,
I could have done without the male character.
yeah, okay. I, give me a second to think on that. 'Cause I don't know.
Okay. Okay. All right.
all of all of these different films, they tie into structures of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think gender and sexuality plays a central role in them
Yeah.
because most of them, Wonder Woman being an exception,
Mhm.
but you have a male character who's saving the world or saving this group or saving, and really, if we look at it from the perspective of, okay, there's been a crisis of masculinity. This isn't, it's
Mhm.
not anything new.
Right.
There's been crises in terms of the formation of masculinity over a lot of time. It's just there's different ones. But what we do see is, in the contemporary moment, there's also a challenging of the privileged position
Mm-hmm.
of the heterosexual white male
Yeah.
in society.
Yeah.
And I think that some of these films, if you start to read it through the lens of power structures and regaining or lamenting a loss of, then
Mhm.
they become really problematic.
Okay.
Because you're like, okay, they're all looking at this usually pretty authoritarian character
Mm-hmm.
who's usually a straight man, many of times white guy, who's
Mhm.
coming in to then save the world.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
And you're like, okay, so and don't get me wrong, we've seen some diversity trickle into this, and
Right.
some questioning of that paradigm, etc. But the underlying kind of thing that's there, and as I said, my thing is to look at this through questions of gender and
Right.
sexuality.
Right.
And there's definitely the neo-authoritarian vein that I'm tracing, for example, down in Brazilian cinema and contemporary Brazilian cinema. It's not a real far stretch to start looking at, okay, how much of that is actually pulsating within
Yeah.
some of these Marvel
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
figures.
It absolutely makes
So-
sense. Yeah. And there's just kind of, I mean, there's also the American film, American brand of film, or the type
Mhm.
of film just being exported to elsewhere, right? And
Yeah, I mean,
what sells.
It's a cultural product that we defend fiercely.
Right. Well, it's our biggest export.
Yeah.
Our culture,
Yep.
right? Our media. So, and that's how we kind of indoctrinate the rest of the world. Maybe.
Your choice.
Okay.
Words. I'll give those words to you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me have those words. It's so yeah. I mean, going. I guess full circle back to, not really full circle, but coming back to the Portuguese program. I think it's an amazing thing that you guys are doing over there. I mean, you guys are educating people not only in language and culture, but you're really molding minds. And it's awesome that you guys are doing that, and you guys are doing it well.
Hopefully. That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Well, yeah,
That's the goal. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. Since
Of
you were
course.
in the
I mean,
program
I
and
went through the
everything.
program, and I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about my abilities, about what I could do, and it's definitely gotten me better prepared for the program I'm in now.
Mhm.
So I think it's, a lot of it does carry over,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Regardless of the subject matter.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
think that at the contemporary moment, we need more humanities
Training. And,
training, because what you learn in these classes, that they may not be instrumental.
Yeah.
That is, say, they may not tell you how to do X thing,
Mm-hmm.
but if they're teaching you to think and they're expanding what you think you know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and they're questioning, they're leading you to question, okay, this is the way that I see it. Well, my worldview is a limited one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, we all have our it's marked by experiences. People's experiences are different, and we need that ability to have, in order to have empathy, in order to understand, in order to also dialogue,
Yeah.
etc. We need to be able to also question ourselves
Right.
and realize,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
That view that I thought was it
Mm-hmm.
isn't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other possibilities,
Yeah.
questions, etc. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying you need to be able to take it apart
Yeah.
and start to question it. And then after you question, you may say, you know what? No, I totally agree with where I started.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But take yourself through the process.
I think it's a great
Right.
process. Absolutely. And you get to do it in Portuguese.
And which is
And
all the,
do well
all
in
the
Portuguese.
better.
All the better. And you get
So-
to travel with the language. You get to go to there's countries in Africa. There's one country in Asia, right?
Well, you have it's a country. You have Goa that's in
Goa.
India, which was a
Oh,
Portuguese
so,
colony.
yeah.
Right.
Those Portuguese colonized a lot.
Yeah, and so it was. But Goa is a really interesting space. I was
You've been there. You've
yeah,
been
I was there
there.
a few years ago.
Yeah, I
And
remember
it
you
was
talking about how
really,
hectic
really-
India is.
Yeah,
Just so many people.
yeah. It's well. I mean, we were up in Delhi, and I was like, wow. I've been to Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and whatnot, and I was just like overwhelmed. And I usually don't get too overwhelmed in big
Yeah.
cities, but
Yeah.
there I was like, okay, this is like, wow.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I mean,
Delhi, Bombay.
I went to Mexico City
Yeah.
for before ever went to New York City, and New York City was tame compared. I felt as far as the metro went, and just the amount of people, and just
Yeah.
how just like you just hot traffic, and I was like, oh, well, this
Yeah.
is nice. There's air conditioning in the subway.
So you circle the whole way back to the beginning of the program. There's
Yeah.
air conditioning.
The air conditioning, yeah, because me and heat, man, me and heat. But there's different parts of Brazil's a massive country.
It is.
It's bigger than the United States, right? Or
In
it's
terms of
land size.
well, are you including or not Alaska? That's always the question. Because
Well,
Alaska, then
Alaska's as big as Brazil,
Alaska's
as by
just imagine
itself.
You're like with or without.
With or without Alaska. So yeah, but it's the 48 states. I was about to say 28.
But-
Obviously didn't major in math.
Or geography.
Or geography.
No, I mean Brazil is huge and it's amazing. I mean the good thing is now you fly around. In the late '90s when I was there, we didn't have money to fly, and so we ended up going from down in southern Brazil out to Brasilia, and I think we spent 3 days on the bus.
Yeah, I remember
And
you
it
guys
was
telling me
like,
that
whoa,
story.
Man.
3-day drive on the bus to get to the central, not even central Brazil. It's
Yeah.
kind of central.
No, it's
pretty
pretty
cen-
central. I
it's
mean,
pretty-
that's why I was moved out there. In part
Right.
was to have a more center point around the nation, and
Yeah.
right. But you realize this country is massive. I mean, the same thing.
Yeah.
The States is also pretty massive. I mean, I've taken the bus across the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, I mean, at the end, you're like, I just went off this Greyhound because also the experience on the Greyhound is always.
Well, it was
an
Greyhound.
experience. Yeah.
Also, it was a Greyhound.
It's curious.
And I've done the drive. This summer I did the drive from Portland to Albuquerque in one shot.
Ouch.
22 hours. I was hurting,
I
physically.
imagine so.
physically hurting, and
We did
that was
14, and that was bad.
yeah. It's a heck of a drive, but yeah, I mean the size of the U.S., but Brazil seems a lot bigger, as far as maybe it's because the roads aren't more interstate roads. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
our
yeah.
interstate road system in the States is designed to promote automobile use, et cetera. and
Right.
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But
But
I
the-
haven't. I mean, I haven't driven. Like, I never drove. I've taken buses around Brazil,
hmm
and the positive to that is I can sleep part of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Driving, you're much more conscious of just how far you've driven, right?
You're
like,
just actively participating in
God.
the thing.
yeah. No, you're like, okay.
It's like watching a
Dying.
10-minute long scene of a still shot. No, and then Brazil has so much. I mean, so much culture from the north to south, and
Well, and it's very varied.
and then
it's
and then
amazingly varied.
and then you have the Amazon, and you have the south, which is it's different, right? It's not too different. It's mountainous.
It's different. It's not too different. It's mountainous.
It's mountain. I don't know. What I'm trying to get. It's
Hold on.
not jungle. It's not the Amazon.
no,
Put it
it's
that way.
definitely
It's
not.
different.
No, it's.
And then the north is kind of like.
Did I just move that? No.
I think you're good.
No, you're fine.
And the northeast is what's the word I'm looking for?
At
Arid?
Atlântica?
Yeah, more like
And then you have
like
the arid parts.
yeah, kind of
Well,
a
in
high
the
desert.
south you have the Pampa,
Yeah,
right? So when you come up out of Uruguay and come up through, I mean, it's a very similar landscape as Uruguay,
Mhm.
northern Argentina, flat, huge expanses of lands.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, that's why
It's greener.
That's why the meat is so famous from that area, because you have grass-fed, free-range cattle traditionally.
A
in there.
hipster's dream.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, there's the whole thing, the churrasco.
Yeah.
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 And,
So?
and it is good.
Do Argentines or Brazilians have the better meat?
I've got to go with Brazil.
You just got to go with Brazil.
It's just that way.
I agree. No, I agree. I would just,
It's also a lot of preparation. It's how they prepare. So it has a lot to do with how you like. Do you like the parrillada, or do you like the
Oh
churrasco,
man,
or
you're making
where are
Brazilian food so good.
you? Yeah.
There's a lot of it coming into the U.S. I went to Costco the other day, and Pau de Queijo was there.
Don't you get to Costco?
Yeah, like it's called Brazi Bites,
Wow.
and they're like you can buy a frozen bag of it, put it on like a sheet, and then bake them.
God, that just sounds so decadent. I'm gonna have to run over there.
Oh well, my kids love it, man. They're just like, yeah, Pau de Queijo, and they're like, yeah, they're digging it. So like Brazilian culture is making its way. Again, more so than than Chiquita Banana and Carmen Miranda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a few years past, so
Just a little bit.
just a little, just a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, here in Albuquerque, you have like over at Tallinn,
Mhm.
you have some things because they have guarana,
The soda drink.
the soda drink, and
Oh, so good.
some of those random things.
Yeah. Yeah.
available.
Feijoada is so good, but it's hard to
Oh,
find
I
good
love
feijoada.
feijoada.
Oh, you like
Yeah.
it?
Oh, I love it.
It's so good. It's so
Yum.
good. But you're vegetarian. Yeah. How do you do
Mostly.
feijoada? Mostly.
I'm not real dogmatic about it.
Okay, I
Like,
do it if it's cultural things. I'll eat it. Like if someone's presenting it to me, I'm like, okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you like that?
It's just based on how I feel at the moment.
Okay. Okay.
That is, say if I'm in the mood, and then
Is that what they call flexitarians?
flexitarian. I
You're just,
haven't heard
you're
that.
just flexible with
But-
what you eat and when you eat it.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have meat once every 6 months,
Okay.
so it's not very often.
Yeah.
But it also, if I'm in the mood for it, and that's where I'm at, then that's where I'm at.
Right on. Brazilian meat has a
So-
lot of Brazilian food has a lot of meat in it,
It's quite meat centric, and
but it's good regardless. Yeah.
it is.
Do we have a Brazilian restaurant here in town besides Tucanos?
I don't believe so.
Hmm.
Don't believe so.
Anybody out there
So,
who's watching or listening?
there you go.
Start a restaurant,
Start a-
Brazilian restaurant.
Yeah.
I'll be your
There you
customer.
go.
You got feijoada. You got
Pão de
some
queijo, you're
pão
like,
de queijo.
I'll drop my kids off in the morning.
You guys
they can
feed
have
them.
it.
They just eat all day. It's a
Yeah,
it's a
pick
good
'em
it's
up
a
little bit
deal.
Later, you're like, I'm good.
Put them in work. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
care. They can start pitching in on the bills. Okay. I think I really appreciate you coming on. Was there
Always.
any nuggets of wisdom or anything about the UNM Portuguese program or?
My nugget of wisdom is try it. They
Try
would
it.
say,
Yeah.
get out, try it. For
It's-
music, if you like music, check out Brazilian music. If you like cinema, check out Brazilian cinema.
So good.
If you like, or Latin American cinema,
Mm-hmm.
check out what's out there. You might be surprised, especially if you speak Spanish, how much you understand.
Yeah. The Brazilian cinema class was in English even.
Yeah,
because
that
we-
one it's an outreach course that I do, so
Yeah.
it's in English, and then with subtitles.
Yeah, so that one was in English, but that was a great one too because it gets you a good idea of Brazilian film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
an
it's a
awesome
nice
class.
it's a nice overview.
Yeah.
It really there's quite a bit there, and we have different things in town, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Instituto Cervantes has done some stuff. Cine Magnifico has done some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Latin American Studies students,
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
In the spring, they have a film series, and most of the time, most of them have integrated at least a couple of Brazilian films.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always the possibility. Okay, I don't know which one I want to check out on Netflix, but
Yeah.
they're showing something at the Guild
Yeah.
with one of these, or down at the
Yeah.
Cervantes Institute. Check it out.
What's some of the stuff they have on Netflix right now? They have that Brazilian show. What is it called? 3%.
Oh, I watched that.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
What else is there? Do you know?
Well, the most recent thing that I've watched was Trabalhar Cansa,
Okay.
which is a horror film, of course.
Oh, okay. Trabalhar Cansa. What was that one? Neon Bull. Is that one still on
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, that's still up. That's a great film.
That's such a great film.
It's a really amazing.
Talk
film.
about like slow pace, but it's really good.
Yeah, and it's one that kind of it leads you to places where it's kind of like, what are your expectations, and it keeps throwing them into question
Mhm.
in terms of how the protagonist expresses his sexuality, gender,
Absolutely.
construction, etc. And
It
you're
just
like, okay.
it destroys your expectations completely.
Yeah, because
You're-
it refuses the stereotypes.
Yeah,
that
it
you
does. It
kind of-
refuses it completely, and you're
Yeah.
like, what?
So it's a really
Yeah.
good film, and it's
It's
beautifully
amazing.
shot.
Oh, it is. I mean, the
so-
use of the color,
Yeah.
the use of the neon lights, literally the neon color. It's an amazing film. Anyways, thank you so much, Jeremy.
No worries. Thanks for
I
the
really
invite.
I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you guys for watching.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we'll catch you
everybody.
guys next time.